Shabbos Daf Memvav continues the discussion of the opinion of Reb Shimon that something which begins Shabbos Muktzah does not stay Muktzah as long as its reason for Muktzah goes off. And the Gemara will continue finding various Amoraim and what they hold about Reb Shimon. Some will hold like him, and some will hold like Reb Yehuda against him. Then the Gemara will try to narrow down Reb Shimon's opinion again and show different cases in which Reb Shimon would say that something is Muktzah, even though its Muktzah state has gone off. It remains Muktzah for the rest of Shabbos or Yom Tov. The Gemara will have a couple of contradictions within Reb Shimon, and that will help us narrow down what his opinion is. We find the Gemara in the middle of trying to understand why it is that a heavy candelabra would be muktzah on Shabbos, whether or not it has a candle burning on it in the beginning of Shabbos. The Gemara had said that a heavy candelabra is certainly muktzah according to everybody, and a light candelabra is a machlokes between Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish says that it's muktzah, and Rav Yochanan says that it's not. So the Gemara is trying to figure out why. What's special about candelabras that they're automatically muktzah? So the Gemara first says, it's Rav Yosef. We saw that because they are heavy, you set a place for them aside, and they're not meant to be moved from there. Anything which has a specific place that it's supposed to stay in and not be moved is obviously not going to be functional for you on Shabbos. Not going to be able to do anything with it. Therefore, it's muktzah. So the Gemara says that Abaye asks on that. I'll show you an example of something which has a set place, but it is not muktzah on Shabbos. And he brings the example of a kilas chasanim. Now, kilas chasanim is a canopy which hangs over a bed. It's supported by two poles on either end of the bed, one at the foot and one at the head, and a crossbar between them at the top. And then the canopy is draped over it so that it makes a tent shape over the bed. Now, the halacha of kilas chasanim is we have a statement of Shmuel that says that you're allowed to assemble it on Shabbos. Shmuel's point is that it's not an isser of ohel, it's not an isser of constructing a shelter, because its roof, its flat part, is less than a tefach wide. But we clearly see that it's not muktzah. And he says you're allowed to assemble it and you're allowed to disassemble it. So obviously it's not muktzah, even though it has a set place. So that couldn't be the reason. Having a set place doesn't make things muktzah, and that couldn't be the reason that candelabras are muktzah. So Abaye therefore offers a different explanation. He says, no, the reason that these candelabras are muktzah is because we're referring to one that is comprised of sections. It is it is assembled of parts, and we're afraid that if you move it, it'll collapse, and then you'll be tempted to put it back together, which would be an issue of binyan b'kelim on Shabbos. It will be constructing something on Shabbos. You're not allowed to do that. Well, if that's true, so then why would Reish Lakish say that a light candelabra is permitted to move? You should have the same concern to light one as heavy ones. Why should there be a difference between the two? Where it says, okay, you're right, we're going to revise it. We're not talking about a candelabra which is actually sectional. We're talking about one that appears to be sectional. The way it's made is that it has sections in its construction, but it's really one piece. It doesn't actually screw together. It doesn't actually come apart. It just appears to. The problem is that if you let people move that one, then they're also going to move one which is actually sectional, and then that one might collapse, and you could have all the issues that we had before. So large candelabras were commonly made of sections. Therefore, if you have one which appears to be made of sections, it's easily confused with one that is made of sections, and it makes sense to make a gzeira. You shouldn't move even one that appears to be sectional, because then people will come to move the sectional one. However, small candelabras are generally not made of sections. There's no point in making a small candelabra that needs to be assembled. So you have a small one with these grooves, these shapes that appear to be sectional. It's not really so easily confused with a candelabra that is actually sectional, because this one's too small to be sectional. So nevertheless, Reish Lakish says that you should make a gzeira on that, so that you can make a general rule not to move candelabras on Shabbos. And Rav Yochanan says, no, you don't have to worry about that, that's not an issue. Okay, now the Gemara goes back to our original discussion, which we had yesterday on the Daf, which is trying to figure out if the Amoraim hold like Rav Yehuda or Rabbi Shimon. The Machlokes of Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon was about a candle that went out on Shabbos, is the lamp or the cup, is it muktzah? While it was burning, it was definitely muktzah. According to Rav Yehuda, anything which begins Shabbos in a muktzah state stays a muktzah for the entire Shabbos, even if the original reason for the muktzah ends. But Rav Shimon, no, once the candle goes out, it's not muktzah anymore and you don't have an issue. So we had said that Rav Yochanan holds like Rav Yehuda. Now the Gemara says, but I'll prove to you that Rav Yochanan does not hold like Rav Yehuda, because Rav Yochanan always says that we paskin like a stam mishnah, a mishnah that doesn't give a name. Now we have a mishnah, which we quoted earlier in Daf Mem Dalid, which talks about a wheel of a wagon, which is removable wheel, and it had said that if you put money on it at the beginning of Shabbos, if it has money on it on Shabbos, it's muktzah because it serves as a base for the money which is on it. That seems to imply that if the money's not on it, that it's not muktzah. That would be even if the money was on it in the beginning moments of Shabbos. Once the money's off, it's not muktzah anymore. That would seem to indicate that seems to fit with Reb Shimon's approach. The fact that the money came off makes the muktzah stop. So Rabbi Shimon has to hold like a stam mishnah, and then he should hold like this mishnah, which is clearly like, Rabbi Yochanan has to hold like a stam mishnah, so he should clearly hold like this mishnah, and which is clearly like Rabbi Shimon. So how could we say earlier on Daf Mem Hey that he holds like Rabbi Yehuda? So Gemara answers that you made the wrong implication. The mishnah here says that when the wheel has money on it, it's muktzah. It doesn't mean to say that when the wheel doesn't have money on it, it's not a muktzah. It means to say that if the wheel never had money on it at all, even the beginning of Shabbos, it's not muktzah. What would be an in-between case where it had money on it in the beginning of Shabbos, but now it's not on there anymore? That would still be included in that case, and that would also be muktzah in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. The Gemara now continues its list of how Amoraim held regarding this machlokes. The Gemara says that Rabbi Shua ben Levi says that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi once traveled to a place called Diospora, and over there he paskined, and here we have an interesting phrasing, he paskined regarding a menorah, regarding a candelabra, he paskined as Reb Shimon with regards to a ner, with regards to a candle lamp, and oil candles. The Gemara says, what does it mean? About a candelabra, he paskin like Reb Shimon regarding a ner. What does that mean? That just like Reb Shimon holds that a ner is mutter to move once it goes out, he paskin that a candelabra is mutter to move once it goes out, or he paskin about a candelabra that it's usher. And about a ner, he paskin like Reb Shimon that it's mutter. What does this mean? That he said that the ner is mutter like Reb Shimon, or he said that the candelabra is mutter like Reb Shimon? The Gemara says we're not sure. The question will stand. We're not sure exactly what it means. Okay, next, the Gemara has that Rav Malkiah visited the home of Ram Simlai, and over there he moved a lamp that had gone out on Shabbos. So we see he held like Rav Shimon, and Rabbi Simlai was upset. He said that's not what you're supposed to do. So you see that Rabbi Simlai held like Rabbi Yehuda. Next, we had that Rabbi Yosi Glila'ah, that's the Meir Rabbi Yosi, visited Rabbi Yosi bar Chanina, and over there he also moved a lamp, and he obviously held like Rabbi Shimon, but Rabbi Yosi bar Chanina was upset. So again, he held like Rabbi Yehuda. So they also disagreed about the same subject. Next, we have Rabbi Abbo. So before we had said that Rabbi Yochanan held like Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shua ben Levi held like Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Abbo was the Talmud of both of them. So Gemara says that when Rabbi Avo was in the town of Rabbi Shua ben Levi, he would go like him and like Rabbi Shimon, and he would move a lamp that went out on Shabbos. But when he was in the town of Rabbi Yochanan, he was machmir not to. So the Gemara says, well, what do you mean? He has to hold like one or the other. Why would he do that? The Gemara says, actually, he held that it was a mutter. He held like Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Shua ben Levi that it was a mutter. But in the town of Rabbi Yochanan, he was machmir to do what Rabbi Yochanan held in deference to Rabbi Yochanan. So that concludes the Gemara's discussion about this issue. Now we go back to a subject which we discussed earlier on Daf Mem Dalid, called Muktzah Machmas Miyus. That is something which you wouldn't use on Shabbos, and therefore you might consider it Muktzah, which you wouldn't use for the reason that it's a little disgusting, it's gross. So is that a reason to make something Muktzah? Again, muktzah is defined as something which you mentally consider useless on Shabbos. And there are many reasons why you would mentally consider something useless. The question here is, what about something which is disgusting? So before we had seen that Rabbi Yehuda holds that if something is disgusting, that makes it muktzah, and Rabbi Shimon did not think so. Now the Gemara has a machlekes amarayim within Rabbi Shimon's opinion. Rabbi Shimon, who held that a lamp which burned and went out is not muktzah because of its being disgusting. What about if it burned kerosene? Kerosene is particularly greasy and gross, so does that make the lamp disgusting and therefore muktzah if it burned kerosene? So Rabbi Yehuda the Amora said that Rabbi Shimon says kerosene lamp would be muktzah because it's disgusting, or Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef said it's not. So Gemara wants to know why. The Gemara quotes an incident. The Gemara says that Rav Avia once visited Rava's house, and his shoes, Rav Avia's shoes were full of mud, but he put them up on the bed in front of Rava. And Rava was upset and decided to challenge Rav Avia. And he challenged him by asking him a question. He asked, what is the reason of Rabba and Rav Yosef that hold that a kerosene lamp is not muktzah even though it's really disgusting according to Rabbi Shimon? So the Gemara said, Rav Avia answered, because it still has a function, even though it's disgusting. You can't use it for most things, but you could use it to cover a bottle or a container or something. So Rava said, very funny, if you consider covering something used, then every rock in the street isn't muktzah because it has a function. You could use it to cover up your bottle. So Rav Avi said, no. The concept of using something as a covering only makes an object functional if it is otherwise functional, just that function is not enough. Okay, so this lamp, which is in essence it's a functional object, but it's not functional as a lamp anymore because it's disgusting, but it's still functional to cover a bottle, so that maintains its functionality, and now it's not muktzah. A rock in the street never had a function. The mere ability to use it to cover something is not enough to give it a function. It's not enough to make it functional. Okay, the idea of covering a bottle only helps for functional items that are losing their function. It does not help to give a non-functional item a function. Now, it's interesting that Chassam Sofer explains this exchange. He says that this is referring to Rava's halacha later, who says that rocks are never muktzah because you can use them to scrape off your shoes. Now, Rav was upset about that, and that's why he put his muddy shoes on his bed. And Rava tried to show that he's right. He said that if you hold that it's not, if you hold that the rocks are muktzah, and that's why you put your shoes on my bed, so then how do you explain Rabba and Rav Yosef? And Rav Avi explained what the difference is. Okay, now Rav Avia brings a proof to himself. Rav Avia says, if you look, there's a brisa discussing what you're allowed to wear on Shabbos, and you don't have to be concerned for carrying. So it lists bracelets, nose rings, rings, and all kinds of jewelry. Now those things don't really have a function. If you can't wear them, then they're certainly not functional. You can't do anything with them. However, they're still considered to be functional objects because they do have a function. They're jewelry, they just don't have much of a function now. So a similar thing would apply to this kerosene burning lamp. It has a function. The function doesn't count anymore because it's disgusting. But because it has any minimal function, such as covering a kli, so that makes it still be called functional. But that would not apply to stones, which b'etzem don't have any function. So Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said, Baruch Rachmana, blessed is the Kadosh Baruch Hu, who helped Rav Avia that he should not be embarrassed by Rav. The Gemara now asks a contradiction within Rabbi Shimon's opinion from the case of a Bechar. Bechar is a firstborn animal, which the halacha is that has to be brought as a carbon in the Beis HaMikdash. Today that we don't have karbanos, you have to wait until it gets a mum, until it develops an injury which renders it unfit as a carbon. Only then are you allowed to shecht it and eat it. Now, therefore, on Yom Tov, it's permitted to shecht. So animals aren't really muktzah on Yom Tov because you can shecht them. But an animal which is a bechar, you can't shecht until it gets a mum. So a bechar without a mum is muktzah on Yom Tov. Now what if a bechar develops a mum on Yom Tov? So you would expect that Reb Shimon would say that now it's reason for its muktzah state, the fact that it was a bechar, has gone off. It's no longer muktzah because now it has a mum and now you can shecht it. That's what you expect Reb Shimon to say, but that's not what he says. He says even if it develops a mum on Yom Tov, it still stays muktzah for the whole rest of Yom Tov because it started Yom Tov muktzah. So how does that fit with what he says in the case of the candle, that he says that once it goes out, it's muktzah status, it goes off, and it's not a muktzah anymore? So Gemara answers, Reb Shimon only says that something which is muktzah becomes not muktzah when it's muktzah, when the reason for its muktzah leaves. In the case of something like a candle, where when the Yom Tov or the Shabbos began, you were expecting the candle to go out. You know, candles go out. You were expecting, you were waiting for it, and therefore mentally you never disengaged from this object and considered it functionless. You knew that once the flame goes out, it'll be functional. I can use it again. However, the case of a Bechar, you do mentally disengage from, because you are not in control, nor do you have reasonable expectation that its muktzah status will end. You don't know if it'll get a mum, and even if it gets a mum, where are you going to find the Talmud Chacham to paskin that it counts as a mum? So therefore, it's not in your control. You have no reason to expect it then, and therefore you do mentally disengage from it. So again, Rav Shimon's not saying that any muktzah status ends. He's saying that it really goes by your mental state. If you mentally disengage from it, then it's muktzah, but not necessarily do you mentally disengage from a burning candle. You mentally consider it useful when it will go out on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Now the Gemara asks on this from a case in which something becomes not a muktzah based on factors out of your control, and yet we say that its muktzah status goes off. The Gemara has a Mishnah which says that a woman who makes a neder on Shabbos that she won't eat certain foods, so that food is muktzah to her. But then if her husband or her father is mefer the neder, that means that he cancels her vow, then she's allowed to eat it. But what do you mean? But there it started Shabbos muktzah, and the fact that the thing was canceled was not under her control, so it should stay muktzah. So Gemara answers, no, a woman who makes a vow is always on the condition that her husband or her father should accept it, and therefore she never really mentally disengages from the object, because she always knows that it's dependent on their approval. So the mental disengagement is not there. So Another says, but what about the second case in that Mishnah, which says that anytime somebody makes a vow, he's allowed to go to a chacham. He can go to a scholar and ask him to release him from the vow, and chacham is able to do that for you. So there, same thing should apply. It's not under his control, and yet we say that once he cancels the vow, he cancels the neder, it's not muktzah anymore. So Gemara says that's because it really is under your control, because although you may not be able to find a chacham to be matir the neder, you could just find 3 regular people to form a bezdin and say mutulach, 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 and therefore it's not such a problem, and it is considered under your control, therefore again you don't mentally disengage from it. Okay, now the Gemara wants to know, why does Reb Shimon say that while the candle is burning, it's muktzah in the first place? We referred to this earlier on Daf Mem Daled. What is the reason that while it's burning, what's the problem? Why can't you move a burning candle at all? So the Gemara first assumes that the reason is because you may put the candle out. If you move it, it may go out by accident. So the Gemara says, well, how could Reb Shimon say that? We know that Reb Shimon holds a davar she'eino miskavin is mutter. If you do a malacha unintentionally, because you're trying to do something else, and you cause a malacha to happen, like for example, if you drag a bench and accidentally you come out that you dig a furrow in the ground, so that's not usher. So why would it be a problem? It shouldn't be a problem even if you move the candle and it goes out. So what? You didn't do anything wrong. It's she'eino miskavin. So Gemara says no. The only time Reb Shimon says she'eino miskavin is mutter if you do an unintentional malacha is when you ended up doing an issur d'Rabbanan. Dragging the bench and making a furrow would only be an issur d'Rabbanan because it's a shinoi. It's not a normal way to dig a furrow. That's not how you plow. Since it's not normal, it's only an issur d'Rabbanan. However, if the candle were to go out, by moving it, that would be an issur d'oraisa. Therefore, Reb Shimon would not say that it's a mutter. The Gemara says that's not true because we see that Reb Shimon says that you're allowed to wear shatnez as long as you're not mechaven, as long as you don't intend to get benefit from it. The case is that somebody wants to sell shatnez clothing, and therefore he's modeling it, and he may get some protection from the sun or from the rain while he's wearing it. So Reb Shimon says it's okay as long as it's not what you're intending. So now wearing shatnez is an issur d'oraisa. You see, Reb Shimon still says that it's not a problem as long as it's not what you intended. So you see that Reb Shimon clearly holds that an issur d'oraisa is okay even as long as it's she'eino miskavin, as long as you don't intend. So Umar says, Rav, this is a totally different explanation as to why Rav Shimon says that a lamp which has a candle burning in it is muktzah. Rav says the reason is because the candle has no function. It's not a functional object. It can't do anything with a burning flame. And the candle is a holding, supporting, and serving the flame. Therefore, it's a basus l'davar aser. It is a base to a muktzah object, which is the flame. And that's what it itself is muktzah.